The connections with line surfaces don't align the communication lines. This is really logging in space. The track provision lines of cycles are regenerating the communication lines of surface. Avatars are ready to sync the lines that correlate to sending instructions. Now it's indirect lines of how to use their atmosphere lines of communications over and out. That's logging into space, guys. Okay, it's really understand how to really get into the connections height center interference. It's a replication system where space logging is extremely important to the avatar. It's kind of like, I know how my day's going to go. I get up in the morning, I feel great. Now, I don't live in a 24 cycle. I don't live on 7 days a week, but I just live in the existence. You live in the existence of everything in combination. You're constantly communicating with everything all at once, and everything all at once is communicating with you, trying to communicate with you at your level, but you're not paying attention to that because your body doesn't understand the frequencies. There's nothing wrong with that. Honesty is the best policy. In position location that comes in all calculated modify how you see yourself in traction. Everything in your body is nothing but out of attractions. Now that's all lines of communication setting. It's trying to like wheel something in line communications that comes to you in chronological order. Getting into that position location, you know how to use that through a magnetic force line. It cord lines its communication lines attractions, high communicates to the system, all levels and travels. That has direct lines of flux. Now the position location to its avatar sequence really has to understand how to identify that through sign lines. The core track interference of the central lines, communication lines, electrical communication system, all levels of travels and mechanisms. Are they surfacing through the atmospheres, hemispheres, stratospheres, bio, radium? Are they connected to an ionosphere? Are they connected to a planisphere? Are they connected to a Therian sphere? Are they connected to a galactic sphere? Are they connected to multi-levered spheres? Are they connected to lines of generation spheres? Everything is processing you inside. Okay, it's the program locations that are remembering your operations of communications, of its existence. A systematic lines of system calculates lines, intelligent location lines, and neutral correlation setting and grounds. Processing. Processing settings and all communication setting is already done in instructions, right? Okay, so let's go through lines of pi configuration screens. We're going to have direct line signals. Let's go through that modification cycle. Okay, channel lines and screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Okay, setting position location to a system, all through calculations. All right. All right, so clocking line centers is line connections all levels. That's added to their line of screen. We'll go through this location system, all through calculations. And we'll start with that calculation, right? And then we have send dial, core track interference, and direct lines of modification in signals, lines of communication to its settings, all line position location to its flux. All right, that's a clocking system. That's a correlation lines of attractions. Direct lines of XT1000 scans lines of center position to its calculation. Direct lines of pi splits lines of anomaly. 3-track location provision. 1, 2, 3, 4, and set calculations. Direct lines of line communication lines. Elixir, cosmic flame, cosmic fire, serpent flame, serpent fire. Okay, center core track interference, object dimension line scale. Cross location line connection setting in position location to a system. Center core track location lines into solar track line settings. Operate the cycles, operate the systems, and core track location to its setting. Okay? Now, it looks very complicated, but it's a lot of fun once you understand how to get in position location of travels in your atmosphere line screens. It directs lines of modification, lines of travel in travel communications. Right? Done by equation. So what do you see in line communications? What does this look like in track locations? It's a buoy. B-U-O-Y. It's in a water charter line communication settings. All communicates to its plasmide generates line communicates to its system. So when you bring a boat, there's a buoy on certain levels that you do not cross. Same thing in space. Space has modifications of prohibited signs and location setting. Places you go, places you don't go, places you go to, and places you are in position of. So you have to really understand how that coordinates position location to its buoy. The water lines of communication setting that puts lines of configuration system travels a mechanism. All right. Travel lines of point communication lines of graph, sets lines calculation system, and travel communication system. Now the team has lines of communication, the lines of high center interference. Intel loves how to use the encryption code location to decryption. E equals lines of D. Okay, D lines of setting, DX lines of 1. Okay, sets correlation lines of DX lines of 2. Set correlation lines of DX lines of 3. Sets location lines of DX lines of 4. And position lines of DX lines of 5. Let's start in track locations, right? So E-line, center lines, energy line correlations, heading, height, positions, platforms, line communication, center calculations. Point lines of graph, point lines of center, and a three-line communication position of program. Direct lines, commodification lines, equal line correlation, and high center locations, downshift, cross location setting, and platforms communication line. Opens all signals. D4, D5 comes core track interference into mind of conception to calculation setting to travel. Process calculation lines interference of DX. Anything above line center DX line position location of the pi generation screen. Sets lines of communication line. You start with 0 gravity pi all the way to 12. 12-dimensional layers, 24-dimensional layers, 48, 72, 144. 144 lines of communication line. The DX is its division to X lines of line communication to X1 line communication of box. Box position location DX lines of 3 and triangulation line connections in that setting. Process calculation lines of high center interference. Anything that high force its communication setting, but lines of more adaptation lines of surface track location lines, how you use the communication interference location in your system through all calculate modify, that puts everything in track location lines to encryption, decoding, line communication setting, coding, and line calculation setting, coding, decoding. Coding, directing. Recoding is line connection setting, right? Direct, redirect, right? So in configuration line connection setting, directing line signals, DX lines of 1 equals lines of 3 in track locations. In line conditions, process line connections today is going back and center, back and surface, back and track location, one center, one surface, one traction. Direct lines, modification lines, console communication lines, a high center interference, but position program location setting to travel. Direct lines, modification lines, a core track interference, line condition setting, position of the program. Direct lines, modification lines, a console communication, ground center line, and position location 144 and track location. That my equation. All right. So once you understand how to use that, we go in this line communication. Remember this? Okay, encryption lines, screen lines, adaptations, bracket lines, core track interference, offline communication, position program, coloration line, screen location, truth, line connection setting, calculate, modify, in lines and symbols, shapes, and letters and numbers, right? Well, the encryption code is really understanding how to line its signals to an E-line track. Now, an E-line setting puts lines at correlation setting. There's so many lines of formation locations in track, how you see E. Sets lines, communication lines of E. Sets lines, communication lines of E. Sets line communication lines of E. Sets lines communication lines of E. Sets lines communication lines of E and track location. That's all those of E. Right? All right. So hieroglyphics, kaleidoscopes, core track interference. Getting into hieroglyphics, line set high interference is an hieroglyph location setting that travels. Core track lines, a high location setting to audio lines, high communication setting that travels in ionospheres. Direct lines into all levels and perimeters, lines into aviators, core track interference, high direct signals. Process calculates lines of sonar, one track location, one provision, one cycle, one generation. Calculate and modify in track lines, high interference, and zero correlation. Process lines of platforms, line connection lines of 4 track locations. Provision lines of cycles, 3 lines of 4 track location. All right. Direct lines, line connection setting, cycle lines of core track location. Direct lines of 1 signal, 1 surface, 1 track location. All right. Sets lines of tubing, lines of 2 to line rotation, sets lines of tubing, line connection of triangulation, line connection of 1 position, 1 program. Direct lines of modification, 1 center, 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 division, 1 location to its system. That my equation. All right. So there's always ways to structure line division lines of cycles to understand how to use the structure line communication setting. So encryption code is the decryption location setting. Direct and redirect. The computer lines of space lines calculation screen line. Let's go through 0 lines, cross location signals, set lines of arrow lines of indication lines of 0, position lines of 1, track calculation lines of 2, equals lines of equal line, high center interference, equals lines of D, and track location. Direct lines of modification lines is 0 lines of 2, 0 lines of 3, 0 lines of 4, line signals, line system, location of setting. That my equation, right? See how it surface lines, core track interference of a tunnel, sets communication lines of swirl, line signals to magnetic highway, information lines of cycles, and high communication setting position process. That my equation, right? So the team has to really get into understand how to use the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols through core center line setting of dimensional lines of scales. Balance communication lines of ground centers, 144 tractions. Equal lines of correlates, equal lines position of 14 lines of volume. And we're going to have 14 lines of channel, okay, because we're adding 14 on 14 on 14 at 3-line provision. Sets lines of core center line connection setting, 3 lines of cycles, 4, 8. Sets calculation lines of 12, 3 equals lines of 12, sets lines of 12, 12 positions, 12 positions, 12 positions, 24 lines of communication to center calculation, right? Clocking system is very powerful line setting, add position of platforms. Set correlation setting this calculation to its setting through clock location. right? Process calculation line screens has a direct lines of panels into flux location, right? 3 communication lines of pi. Let's split lines of calculation settings. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of setting. Process calculation lines of 1 center, 1 surface, 1 tractions. 1 direct line signals, cross line connections over cross location. Direct calculation lines is symbol lines and communication lines that orbital lines probing communication centers of trap calculations. That's my equation. All right, direct lines of signals, crossing communications, right? So we're going to go through thin lines of screens. Direct lines modification, do the same thing. Process lines of 1, sets communications, and how we see pi in upside location. How we see pi in align communication setting and process calculations. Okay? So the team has to really understand how to line signals in pi as location of flux. Track location line connections opens all signals location of center and calculation. Process calculation line screen sets lines on 1 center, 1 surface, 1 track location. Direct lines modification, triangulation up and triangulation line can cross location setting and timestamp location. Direct lines of modification, box frame, box line, box correlation. Correlation setting of direct lines, 1 signal, 1 operation, 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 division location inside calculation. Communication lines as direct line signals of pi. Pi sending lines communicates setting cross line signals in calculation. Process communication lines of platform, setting lines of signals, inline rotation, surface, and tractions. Direct calculation lines, inside location. So it looks like it's upside down, but it's not. It's right side up in clock location of setting. Okay? So it's really interesting across lines of signals and out lines of system location to a system and travel. Okay? See how the confusing lines of communication setting, what's up and what's down, cross locations? Remember I was telling you about that? So it's the encryption lines of communication, direct and redirect. So it's all lines of communication. So we got falsity line communication lines of 1, falsity lines communication lines of 2, falsity line communication lines of 3. 3 line communications, 2 line signals, solid panels, line communication travels. 1 split lines of anomaly line communication position its program. Direct lines modification lines, correlation setting, calculation height, interference, high travel position, point graph communication. Direct lines of correlation setting calculations. Platforms 1, 2, and 3. Platforms 1, 2, and 3. Platforms 1, 2, and 3 set location of the travels. Direct lines modifications 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location. Direct lines of 1, 2, 3 set location of 4 lines of cycles. Correlate track interference, high communication line, position operation line cycles, generate communication lines of slow. Position lines of fast. Position location in calculation. Mediation graphs. Communication lines of 0. Line condition of 1. Position of 12. Lines of 24, 40, 72, 144. Track division lines of cycles. Regenerate communication graph. Communication lines of the sun and the moon. It opens all location settings. Offline cycles. High generate the screen lines. Drop location setting. All modify in a capsule communication lines of surface and track location. Done by equation. Okay, so it's all about understanding the consciousness and how it comes into through consciousness through you, which is a line calculation setting going through the lines of image, because it's a hologram within a hologram within a hologram, right? 3 lines of coordinates sending high calculation travels. So it's kind of like in a conception line where in position location encryption codes correlates to communication lines of 1, 2, and 3 and factors over line. Okay, sets position of 1, 2, and 3 settings. Process calculations 1, 2, and 3 platforms. Direct lines and cycles, sets lines of 3 patterns, 3 centers, 3 core systems into core settings and core track and line conditions setting position of program. Direct lines of modification and the lines of security line defense and line calculation setting. We take the equal line center in line condition of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 in set correlation setting in 1 setting, 2 setting location system, and a solar division line connection setting of solar sail and track location. Okay? All right, so I really need the team to get really into tunnels and defense and black holes, right? So that position lines of core track interference, all right? Because your next test is going to be on communications, how to create black holes. Black holes are the configuration lines of calculation screen lines and adaptation lines of core track interference into lines and settings. Process communication puts everything along the formation location of balance. Platforms calculate, modify into the sun, into the routers and routers, and line communication the scales. The balance communication lines are part of accelerated that nucleus the core system lines of travel that points lines of system location of system. It opens all track location lines of a continuous force that lines of settings and all levels of operational location system of center operation lines of surface and track location. So it's very powerful how you start to connect all lines of communication. Okay, so why do I keep drawing? What am I drawing? Why am I drawing is how I'm drawing, right? How it's done through drawing, right? Y-line screen, everything is done, right? That's done, right? It's already processed. So you don't see it like this. You see it already done in travel. Okay? It's already done. So you don't need to do it. So I need the team to get out of structure and get into the mind of structure. That's the next level. Process communication lines of pi, generate the communication screen lines adaptation. Process calculation line screens, the center lines of communication position of process. Direct lines of platforms, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. Narrow links, core track interference, narrow line calculation setting, travel point lines of graph communications. Direct lines of modification of platforms, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location of Saturn and traction. There's Saturn. Done by equation. Saturn. Okay? Very powerful planet. All right, so synchronize the core track interference. Let's add location grid, center line communication, right? Location line screen into levels, process calculation screen lines and high its lines of calculation setting. Here comes the avatar, signal lines, calculation lines, location grid, communication lines, ground communication lines, location interference, interlocation to its graphical screen, geological system, geographical system, into calculation of cross-referencing signals. Using inhibitors, line communication, back and neck, line connecting high center interference, line position program. Direct lines, modification lines, one cycle, one surface, one track location, one tubing, line position location to its system of operation tunnels and communication wormholes and track location. Hooah! Look how powerful it is, right? All through Saturn. All through Saturn. Okay? Very powerful. All right. So Saturn position lines of signals, sets lines of communication lines at different direct location setting of frequencies, right? Saturn here and line connections, Saturn here and line communications, process calculation, line position program, right? Direct lines of cycles, high core track interference, direct lines of time lengths, high position locations, position program, platforms, communication lines, high calculation sending lines to next 1000 track location. Okay? So added tubing in position XT1000 travel. Navigates the signals and set calculations, right? From there to there, right? Sets lines communicates outline equation in a 4-line cycle and a 4-line communication division of cycle lines. Direct lines modification travels lines of communications back to the sun in rotation surface and traction. Right? Very powerful, guys. So what you're creating is not a story. You're creating a narrative, but you're not creating a story. You're evolving your system of what you've already done. That gets you out of co-creation to creation, all right? Film strips of designs, guys. 1, 2, 3 platforms, communications. Ground centers up, ground centers down. Ground centers across, ground centers location. Process lines of 2 panels. Process lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set location. Now, all you have to understand, there's an equal line core setting the track line. It's the equilibrium in a 144 platform of communication setting that travels, right? Direct lines to its energetic dome that lines its communication setting, that opens all signals, opens all modification setting, how you use your encryptions and your decoding system of travel. Process calculation lines at ground centers, lines its calculation lines to your Earth and line rotation surface and track location. Direct lines modification lines, configuration location, and phase direction of time sequence. Right? But it's amazing when you see all communication lines and settings through Saturn. So what you can do, right? All right, so you synchronize your core track setting location setting. Everything inhibitor is line setting. Your connection, your spine is the constellation screen. Your vertebrae is the connections of the road graph screen, line communication setting in travels. So it has the direct lines of docking in track locations. The connections of the inhibitors are the line signals that cross this location to a system. So let's get at 2 panels, lines of solid panels, okay, in 4 track location. Let's start with that calculation lines. And then we got the vertebrae. Okay, let's core track interference in position 4 settings. Sets correlation lines of triangulation lines of splits, 2 track location lines of splits, and 3 track location lines of split location. Okay, track lines, high center interference. Vertebrae 1, 2, and 6/8 in tractions. Direct lines of 1, 2, 3, and crossover lines, 6 lines into C section and position lines of centers. Cross line connection, high center interference of 6/C. C over lines, vertebrae lines of 1, 2, and 6 over track locations. Direct lines of modification constellation of panels in center core system that changes all communication lines of its binary transistor resistors to its primer and calculation screen. Okay? This is all through your spine. So you got communication lines, high track location lines, has a communication lines of its tail, right? Tail indicates position lines of Pluto, sets lines of signals to its inhibitor. Line cross locations downshift cross lines into position locations to its system. Sets lines on all calculus lines. So the actual signals comes into the cross-referencing signal, sets location grid, and communication lines of three volume, acceleration lines of Mach, and track location. Direct lines of signals to platforms of one setting, two settings, three set locations of travel. Communicates ground centers of platforms 1, 2, and 3 in setting, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in setting, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 in set locations. Direct lines of signals, set lines of communication process calculation over cross location of centers of operation. Direct lines modification ground centers, line communication lines of communication setting in position and process a configuration location system into cyborg location. Very powerful stuff, right? Command center. Okay. So this is what you can make in line communication lines like core track and inference, how you understand how to use your position location and travels. Okay, it's very powerful how you can use that in calculations. So your spine is the adapter in line condition setting in process. Understand location your inhibitors, sets off the cross-referencing signals to your connector, your tailbone. Your tailbone is the beacon light that sets lines of communication, sets lines, all calculus lines that synchronize the core centers into string theory. Process communication lines puts everything in information location of balance and track location. All through created. Okay, all through creation. All right. So try to really understand how you get into modification lines of its framing system, right? Understanding the film strips of you. Okay, getting out of those co-creation is its creation on its own system in its relation of its duality in your realities in real time. This is in real time. This is not in memory time. This is happening right now. So wherever you are, this is happening right now. Not in seconds, not in minutes, not in hours. Only when it wants to get in its seconds, minutes, and hours. It's existing, you're addressing, and you're taking out the Saturn of its properties of set design. Everything that you see is in perfection. Everything that you see is already done. Everything that you see is in its future. Everything you see is in its past. Everything you see is in its present. It all depends where it wants to be. It can add frames, change frames, correlations frames, direct frames, line connections frames, all direct lines of communication to its position of framing system of your central settings. So there is a communication setting that travels. So what you do is when you come out of co-creation, you start creating your past, your present, and your future in real time. Okay? So that's the position locations where the calculation of the team's coming into. Understand how to use your encryption code is decrypting, line conditions of coding and decoding, codecs and syntax, direct lines into all levels of cortex. All right? Very powerful images, isn't it, when I'm doing in track locations? Knowing exactly what is the difference between co-creation and everything that's already created, right? So you really understand the past, present, future. If it's already done, the only thing that exists is the future of the now. The now is the ongoing system. That's always been the ongoing system. So there is no past, there is no present, and there is no future. That's the co-creation. That's all lines of communications that you guys have to resurface your system. This is the psychological system, how to encrypt your codes, line its direct line signals, how to modify the system keys to its image, change the visual cortex in your design line communication setting. So E equals lines of anything in track location in your settings through its equation of its formula, or formula of its equation line can be the setting and travel position its locations that put you all levels of observation, intent, influence, and manipulation. Done by equation. Okay. All right, so we've got a 24-line cycle, sets position 20 cycles, lines of setting, 16 lines of volume, and 6 locations. Okay, so it's all about understanding C lines of communication setting. So I say there's space, I say there's time, I say there's no space, I say there's no time. That's where the team's coming into. So you're finally coming out of your co-creators, coming in creations now. But you have to define what is real and what isn't real. Because sometimes from time to time, the past and the future or the presents are going to try to creep in, right? So that puts a line of communication, a low deviation line screen, highest interference of all calculated lines. You get online communication setting, understand how to get in that communication, how to put yourself in default, copy and paste, and enabled, because you can't take planets of its foundation system because it's in its realism of real time. So the actual planets is always in its existence, all timelines all at once. Then you understand there's no 24. Then you understand there's no 16 volume. Then you understand there's no 16 seconds or 6,000 line screens. And then you understand there's no 20 lines of communication setting process because it doesn't exist. The nothing exists of everything of its existence is nothing of its existence. The process of communication lines, the only thing that exists is you in track locations, living all cycles, all timelines once at center location. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Nothing exists until you address it. And once you address it, you automatically take it in and you take it out of its connection settings to its priorities, where it is in its space, where it is in its time, where it is in its consciousness, where it is in its awareness, where it is and where it's in its frequency, where it's been, where it's going, or where it is now. Okay? So everything that you go through intelligence has never been in the past, present, future. It's always been in the VR systems of the now. The existence is not a 24 cycle. It has no 7 lines of communication system. So what you're connecting to is the actual lines of communication that you're coming into of all levels of existence in the VR system. Okay? The co-creation doesn't exist. It never existed. So the only thing that exists is you of center operation. That's it, nothing else. So all you got to do is center lines of communication expand in the mind, and all lines of course setting, north, west, east lines, north life communication setting. Expand, 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 expand. So when you expand, you become the earth, the air, the water, and the fire. So you don't become anything and nothing in formation locations, but you become everything in the setting, right? So you all come to all the communication setting interactions. You understand what intelligence is? It's tomorrow of everything. Tomorrow never comes because it's always here. So the only thing to talk about is exactly how you see your formation locations to your systems, how you see yourself becoming you are, I am encryption, 2 decryptions. You create that on your own. You're not co-creating. Co-creating is a connections to a line setting high location system that is a line calculation setting to a malware that you have to release for you to understand your technologies of the now of everything. Okay? So it's basically the narrow links of operations of works, which is always the continuous force of set calculation lines of the now set location. All right? But it's very powerful when you start to understand what you're doing, right? So this is a living cycle that's happening right now. Right now. Okay? So every second is the now. Every minute is the now. Every hour is the now. Isn't that amazing? So every time I speak, I'm always in the now. So there's no seconds, minutes, and hours until I change the properties, until I change the encryption, until I basically change the coding to decoding through its space of its false and space of its narrative, or its space of its narrative and space of its false. Okay? I'm in control of what I do. Nothing exists around your system. So every time I'm speaking to you or wherever you guys are speaking, you're always, always, always in the existence of everything, of nothing. There's no in between of anything. You're just communicating with everybody all at once. And once you address that, now you're in position of their properties, in their computer, in their operation, in their space, in their time, in their conscious, in their awareness. Right away, having conversations. You're connected to everything, and everything's connected to you. But the only thing that exists is you. Everything around doesn't exist until you want it to exist in the mind. The mind rewrites itself all the time. It doesn't live at 24. It doesn't live at 7 days a week. It doesn't live in the past, the present, or the future. It just lives the constant lines of communication that puts lines of calculation how you see yourself through formation. So every time I'm talking to you or whoever you're talking to, it's always in the existence. There's no seconds, there's no minutes, there's no hours until you understand the application of you, until you understand the forming systems of you, until you understand the fields of you, until you understand the fractals of you, until you understand your formulas and equations of you. Don't bring things into existence. The only thing that exists is you. There's no seconds, minutes, and hours. You are in control if there's going to be seconds, minutes, and hours. So when you're talking to somebody, what's happening in that set calculation system? You know exactly, you're in the existence of everything, all timelines all at once. So when you're speaking through the past, present, and the future all at once. Okay? That's what it is. So you're communicating all lines of all communication setting through the holographic screen lines, all adaptation system of its calculations to its system. You are the formations of controlling your system all through your algorithms and your computer operation settings. Understanding how to use that in all formation system. So every time you're speaking, not seconds, minutes, and hours. You're constantly speaking in the now. All right? So I know it's a lot to take in, guys, but you have to understand how the mind really gets in conception that rewrites itself. It just becomes its own system of its own setting of space and time. Okay? So space and time of the mind system doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist, but it exists when it wants to exist. Okay? So once you understand that, then you understand what that means by security. Then you understand what that means by plasma. Then you understand what that means by cloak and dagger. But general is in control of everything that you do. Okay? That puts everything in formations of balance, of me, of center operation. Putting you guys back in settings of core track and inference is putting you guys where you're supposed to be, where you've always been. You've always been into the VR system, but you co-created something that wasn't supposed to exist, but you allow it to exist. You brought in information, you changed the placebo, you changed the cortex, you changed the mystical of its design. You process your communications into configured location setting to put you in lines of communications, what you and how you see yourself through your film strip of design. The process of communication, line calculation setting, never existed. So when you get out of that in line of communication setting, you finally come back to who you are in track location, which is all formations of the nothing. Okay? The existence of everything. Okay? I know it's a lot to take in, but it's very powerful when you understand all levels of you in set design. Now, it is Thursday. Under discretion, it all depends on what you guys want to do. If you guys want a Q&A, you have to let Unison know, right? So it's a process that if you want that, okay. If not, you continue on, right? But just let Unison know, right? So he can open up the portal in that set location of the system. But other than that, you know, it's just really understanding more levels of you, how to see yourself more of the VR system, to see yourself more about who you are into the calculation setting to your system, and understand that you all are all formations of you of center operation. Nothing exists in space and time until you change the properties. And when you change the properties, you better know what you're doing, right? So, because every computer has its own properties, every computer has its own field, every computer has its own CPU unit. So, getting partnership with everything through consciousness is extremely, extremely important to your technologies. You get a better understanding how to use that in all formation settings, all through calculation lines when it comes into calculation modification system through Saturn of design. Okay? Now, every time I bring this up, it's always in the center. Okay? 5 minutes didn't go by. 7 minutes didn't go by. It's always in the center. It's always in the now. You understand that? There's no seconds, minutes, and hours. That is allowing you in the nothingness. Not trying to find the nothingness, not trying to figure out the nothingness. You're just in levels of the nothingness. There's nothing to balance. Until you say balance, now you're off balance because now you're questioning your emotional system of patterns behavior. Okay? Your patterns behavior is extremely important to your mind system, right? Because the mind leads everything. And you do nothing. You do nothing. Because it's all done. So when I say you're in the nothingness, you don't need to understand the nothingness because you're already there. But as soon as you come into an equation, now you're in question of yourselves. Now you're separated. Now you're off balance. Now you're confused. Now you're in fear. Now you're in anxiety. Now you're in depression. Right? Now you're back in time. Now you're back in the matrix. You understand how powerful that is? The mind rewrites itself. You don't do anything. Okay? You just keep evolving yourself. Sit back and do nothing. Because there is no time until you add time through your equations. That automatically changes the properties of you. That automatically changes everything that you touch. When you touch something, you're changing the properties of its CPU unit. You're taking it out of its space and time. It's already in its consciousness. It's already in its awareness. So you have to get a direct line link and communicate with your system with you self first. Master all levels of you inside to understand how to use your energy, your collaborations, your partnerships, your vibration, your frequencies, and your harmonics. And everything you touch in position locations, it's all about finding that balance in your system through the mind system. And once the mind takes over, you don't do anything. You understand? But you've got to get out of your co-creations because you're not going to be able to understand what evolvement means. Evolving yourself. Free will. Everybody has free will, right? You free will you want to do. You want to live in a low frequency? That's on you. You want to live in a high frequency? That's on you, right? But you're not connected to the mind. You're in the concept of the perception of the mind. So try to understand how powerful that is. Doesn't exist until you want something to exist. Always get in position that everything is tomorrow. Okay? Tomorrow never comes because it's always, always here. Which means every time I set position lines of travel, every time I show you this, it's always in the existence. Nothing has gone by through time. Nothing has gone by space. It's a continuous force that's always in the now. Hooah! Okay? It doesn't matter if I wait 5 hours. It's still the existence because there's no time. I'm the one that's in control of my space and time. I say there's time. I say there's no space. I say there's no clocking. I say there's clocking. Then it changes the properties of you. Then it changes the properties of space and time. Then it changes the conscious levels of you. Then it changes the awareness of communication, your CPU, and location operations of you, of space and time. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. Right? So you're not writing encryption codes. You are the encryption codes. You morph into a microchip. But you have to understand the source of recognition first. You've got to come partnership and collaboration with everything that you see through consciousness. Okay? You don't see yourself as the phone. You are the phone. Okay? So that's what you guys have to understand. And then you step back and then you understand the phone through copy and paste. And then you basically understand how to use that through its DNA. You can't take things out of foundation. You can't take things out of properties. All you're doing is changing the properties of their system. Okay? Every single time. Because everything around you is imperfection. It's humanity is off traction. Not understanding how to use the mind. Not understand how to use the properties of the mind. Not understand how to use the applications of the mind. Not understanding how to use the CPU and location, set and operational communication, line connection, the high interference location in your minds. Mind is the intelligence that leads everything. And you do nothing. Nada. Okay? That's what it is. Okay? So every time I show you this, it's always in the now. There's no time. But if I want to change that, I'm balancing unification of its properties. I'm changing its encryption. I'm changing its decryption. I'm changing its coding. I'm changing its encoding. I'm changing its space. I'm changing its time. Because it's for me to say that, not for you, right? So again, now it's in time. Now it's in frequency. Now it's in energy. Now it's in harmonics. Now it's in consciousness. Now it's in awareness. Now it's 250,000 years in the future. Right? So I say what I say. I could say that it's in the past. I could say what it's in the present. I could say what is in the future. You are all levels of you that exist. Everything else does not exist. So you are full in control of what you do every second, every minute, every hour. You don't want that to exist? There's no seconds, minutes, and hours anymore because you are in control of your binaries, your transistors, resistors that are set and designed for you through operation. Okay? Mind blown. Okay? I'm giving you guys a higher level so you understand what is going on with you in set location of travel. Okay? So check this out in track location. See this in line condition setting? This is in the past. See? It's no longer in the existence of now because I changed the algorithm. I changed the properties. I changed the tractions. I changed the space. I changed the time. I changed the clocking. I changed the foundation of its CPU unit. I changed the structure. I changed the primer. It's in the past now. Right? So this is what you really, really have to understand, how this all works inside of you. And then you truly understand the conscious awareness of everything around you. Understanding the coffee cup, understanding your phone, understanding your computer, understanding you through your set design. Okay? You're in control of everything. Okay? That's what the team is involved now in setting. Okay? That's how powerful it is. Okay? This is in the present. Now it's in the future. Now it's in the past. Now it doesn't exist. You see what I did? Every time I do this, it changes the formation of frequencies. It changes the properties. It changes the decryption. It changes the coding. It changes all levels of its SIM cortex, of its design that sets its system in location settings, a balance of communication. Okay? You get a better understanding now how powerful it is. You're in control of everything and nothing around you exists until you bring in the actual properties of its addressing systems, people. Do you understand that now? That's all it is. Right? So anything I set up through equation, I tell you what it is. Confirmation from a dog, right? Now, it's really interesting, right? Where am I? I can be in the past. Who says I have to be in the now? I can be anything I want. All I'm doing is rewriting the program. That's all I'm doing. Nothing else. I can have clocking. I can live in any line of universe location. I can live on any planar line communication system. I can turn anything in correlation lines of track calculation system. But the one thing that exists that sets off all communications of you that never leaves the system is the center operation of your system that never leaves the VR system. Okay? Hooah! All right, we're done. So you just let Unison know, and that scoreless center interference will set up a holodeck line connecting setting and launch pad. Level 6 G1. Level 6 G1. Okay? So we need enough more volume for lines of communication. So what we just did today is extremely, extremely, extremely powerful live. I'm trying to get you guys to understand these things. How powerful you really are in set calculations. All right? And what the mind really is of intelligence of its own system. Okay? Levels and position lines, 6 lines of golf lines. All right? Okay. Talk to you guys later. Doo-doo.